had been working with somebody whose family was from right up the street here in Rockport, and she and I developed a script together, and I lived in LA for many years.
Jonathan, the Commander Riker in Star Trek. The course of Frakes' career was unexpected. When Thunderbirds, his film, failed in 2004, he was immediately blacklisted by Hollywood. Studios ceased contacting him. He needed to sell belongings. His spouse started a business he phoned it to help keep things moving. Movie Prison and vanished from the large screen for almost 20 years, but the reality of what transpired thereafter shows a Hollywood attempted to hide the comeback story. On August 19, Jonathan Frakes was born. 1952 in a Bellefonte tiny hospital. His parents were from Pennsylvania. Bellefonte, however, was where all the Jonathan used to joke when babies were born. That even the professors at Penn State came to go see him there for more than just the baby. However, Bellefonte's liquor outlets and his father didn't attend State College. James was a well-known professor of English. And Doris, his mother, was a devoted instructor. When Jonathan was 5 years old, the family relocated to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania following his father's employment at Lehigh at the university. Jonathan and his Daniel, the youngest sibling, grew up tragically. Later, Daniel would die from 1997. Pancreatic cancer in the fourth. Jonathan received a trombone in grade. Didn't select it, but his long arms did. That arbitrary decision led to a lifetime passion for music, which his father instilled in him. Jonathan quickly adapted to jazz. Joined the Grenadier at Liberty High School, a band that was quite popular in Bethlehem. They traveled to Florida in 1970 for the Festival of States and took home the highest honors in the parade and field competitions. Even a city roadway was renamed by the mayor, and Jonathan cherished that moment, their honor. He claimed that the band was superior than the football squad, and individuals arrived solely to observe their halftime performances. Following high, he enrolled at Penn State for college. Despite majoring in psychology, that didn't endure. Spent a lengthy summer working as an usher. A director at a theatrical festival asked him to attend a play that Jonathan had seen. The actors' enjoyment of themselves, and he switched to theater as his major right away. Later, he made a joke about having a degree in perhaps theater isn't the most useful. However, it transformed his life at Penn State. Joined the Thespians and performed continuously. And slept very little, but he enjoyed it. After receiving his BFA in 1974, Jonathan attended Harvard for additional instruction. He entered the expert staff at the Loeb Drama Center acting course and worked over the summers. He stated it with actual theater companies. Was the type of setting where pupils could be employed to complete the cast. Was hard labor, and he gained a lot of knowledge from the more experienced performers and filmmakers around him. That combination of self-control and his practical experience equipped him with he would have to become a pro. Jonathan Frakes earned his theater arts degree from in 1974. He left Penn State and relocated to New York City in pursuit of a goal. Like thousands of other performers with hope, however, New York made things difficult. Shifted furniture, served tables, and once he performed even though it hurt his back. Minor parts in the impossible Ragtime Theater, and even contributed to Eugene the Hairy Ape by O'Neill, published in 1976. Made it to Broadway at last in the Shenandoah, the musical, but one of his oddest jobs was dressing up as Marvel Comics Captain America. Participating in convention appearances was unglamorous, yet it taught him how to handle supporters in a way that would be used in 1977, years later. His first significant break came when he was hired for a part in The Doctors, an NBC soap opera portraying Tom, a Vietnam veteran. Carol. It provided him with a consistent income. For some time, however, the position was short-lived. When his persona was drafted, he should try Los Angeles, the agent advised. He moved west in 1978 after packing up once more. At that point, things gradually began to shift. He didn't suddenly become famous. Yet there were more TV prospects in LA, seen as a guest on popular shows including The Fantasy Island of Charlie's Angels, Quincy Walton's Me, and the Dukes. Of these weren't prominent positions, but they assisted him in becoming well-known. Arriving, picking up the basics, and one audition at a time, he is establishing himself. He was cast in a television film in 1979. Referred to as Beach Patrol, it was intended to be a new show's pilot, but it didn't go anywhere. It's just a dead end. Acted with Christy and Robin Strand. Big produced Dill and the movie. Names such as Aaron Spelling, but even more prominent. Like many, producers were unable to rescue it. Frakes, a Hollywood actor, was trapped in the pilot cycle that never ended. Picked up, he continued to work, but the large then, in 1983, the breach still seemed far away. He believed he had finally located the NBC cast. Him and the popular soap opera Bear. Based on a miniseries, Essence has performed well. There was a great possibility, but though the show was uninteresting to the crowd, and terminated shortly after it began another setback, but something positive this time emerged from it, and he met that set. Jeannie Francis they didn't hit at first. He even made a joke about her hair, but 2 years later, fate wasn't finished with them. They reconnected on the set later in 1985. Between the North and the South in a huge civil war, they spent 6 months filming the miniseries. Over the southern United States, and something clicked this time. Relationship began, followed by the following significant phase of Frank's career in North America. South was popular, and Frakes was notable for at last. Stanley Hazard. People were beginning to take notice of him. Then came 1987. Jeannie and her encouragement of Frank's family auditioned for a revolutionary new sci-fi 7 auditions. And 6 weeks were required for the show. But he was cast in the role at last. As Star Trek's Commander William Riker, the future generation. Now was the time. After years of hardship, everything changed. Forgotten pilots and cancelled shows had caused this, and despite the fact that he and Jeannie became engaged, so they had to postpone the wedding twice due to his schedule for filming, but they managed to occur on May 28, 1988, they got married during the first break of the show. However, Jonathan Frakes wasn't the head of Commander William was an obvious pick. Riker, he had to battle for the position. Might have been directed to Billy Campbell or Jeffrey or even Michael Auger and Combs. The studio was tilting in the direction of other than Gene Roddenberry. The Star Trek creator intervened after observing something in Frakes that might be he didn't simply support him in silence. He pushed hard, made calls, and Frakes obtained the role years later. Frakes acknowledged Roddenberry recognized himself in perhaps more than a little once on Riker, the show that Frakes unintentionally made the Riker, anything that became a legend. It wasn't intended to be a cool move. The set's chairs were low and awkward, so rather than sitting normally he simply swung his leg behind it. Seems audacious, perhaps too audacious. Frakes later remarked that it could have seemed to be in move, but it was adored by supporters. Jack Quaid even replicated it in Lower Decks with Riker's yell as he mounting a saddle. In addition to, however, the insurrection Riker maneuver, that one was more about fighting strategies while combining the best aspects of broadcast, something that viewers didn't find compelling. Anticipation of Jonathan Frakes. Since Riker wasn't no longer only the composed second in command, he was speaking with someone in person shortly. Commander Shelby played by with a crisp during their scenes together. Elizabeth Denny. The silent tension caused Riker to roll his eyes. Shelby pushed harder, and for years, fans adored it. Subsequently, when the episodes were aired in theaters that people may still recall, someone even shouted, "Read it, girl." When Riker was challenged by Shelby in that line in the elevator wasn't just amusing. Demonstrated the strength of their chemistry. People in the audience could sense it. Began to envision a version of the program. in which Shelby was the captain and Riker was his top choice, which left you wondering what might have happened. It wasn't merely a plot twist, it revealed a new aspect of Riker was a man who wasn't sure he was prepared for the large chair, but it's not all about Jonathan Frakes. Star Trek was serious. Once revealed something unexpected, he stated Gene Roddenberry warned him against smile. Frank said, "It was ridiculous." Later, they laughed about it, cast me, and then instructed me to avoid smiling. The fact is the cast was noisy and the set was full with humor. Jovial and constantly amused. Frank's Brent Spiner and Patrick Stewart desired must convey that enthusiasm on screen as well. Loved the classic trio of Bones, Spock, and Kirk desired the same spark that they did more than only recite lines. They teased, they rolled their eyes at one another. Enjoyed themselves, and that connection was evident in it. Wasn't just acting in every episode. Was genuine camaraderie leaking into their characters. At the time of Jonathan Frakes' initial requested to helm a Star Trek episode, he could tell the next generation Rick, the producers didn't believe him. Berman, executive producer of the show, refused, but Frakes could see it in that doubtful expression on his face persisted. Therefore, rather of pushing once more with word breaks ceased to exist and began to working. He prepared for months. He sat in editing rooms for around 300 hours, participated in casting sessions and went to each pre-production session he was able to enter. After then, he arrived with a 47-page presentation. It had everything. He meticulously created storyboards by hand, character breakdowns and camera setups. That the document became known as the Riker Directive. Afterwards, Berman looked something had changed, but Frakes hadn't simply requested a shot, and he constructed his own chance from the beginning. The first he directed one episode of The Offspring. Poignant tale about data building and Frakes. It wasn't easy being an android daughter. Continued to play Commander Riker, so he had to balance directing and acting. It he wore his Starfleet at the same moment. Uniform beneath the jacket of a director sprinting to get in from behind the camera. In front of it he worked on scene after scene. He hardly slept during the 18-hour days, but it paid off. The March 1990 episode aired and became among the most highly acclaimed in the whole series. Frakes wasn't even content with his performance in the in fact, he requested that the editors shorten his scenes in this way. He was concentrating on the directing side. Subsequently stated, "I prefer it and I'm more adept at directing than performing." However, not everyone immediately trusted him. None of his co-stars were certain how to respond to a calling of their own. Patrick Stewart was courteous in the pictures public, but he wasn't behind the scenes. Indeed, a performer could guide other performers. Marina Sirtis didn't give him a glance. The first morning, they had a show. The episode's love plotline, and she was afraid it might cause awkwardness. Brent Spiner, who performed as Data, arrived ready with additional notes to safeguard his character, but Frakes managed everything. Didn't pull rank, instead concentrating on performance, which he observed intently. By the end of the second day, Stewart was different. Sirtis was laughing with him in his head. Spiner put his notes aside once more. The whole cast began to recognize Frakes had taken an action that they hadn't prepared for. This, yet they failed to see, was referred to as his stealth directing. Every time he played Riker, he would arrive 90 minutes early in order to prepare all of the angles he has already shot. He had prepared lists and reviewed everything beforehand with the cinematographer. While the rest of the crew is having lunch, took pauses, he shut himself inside the no one in the editing bay to review the footage, requested that he do so, and he did it. That's how he kept everything in order, without giving the impression that he was flaunting. And in regards to the camera work, Frakes possessed a covert firearm. Following after wrapping the shoots, he would go to a tiny bar with Marvin called the Warp Core, the director of photography for Rush. The show hours would pass while they sipped Macallan 18. And he would learn cinematography from Rush. The angles of light positioning when utilizing bar napkins composition, everything took place between Frakes preserved dozens of beverages and scribbles. 13 of those napkins remain displayed in by the time Paramount required his office. A director for Star Trek First Big was not their first option for contact. Names such as John and Ridley Scott McTiernan had previously declined, but Frakes knew more about Star Trek than anyone else. Recognized the character's tone, world, therefore he was hired by Paramount. Frakes had 10 and 12 weeks to get ready. Weeks to shoot, which was a significant shift. From the television he was accustomed to only 7 days are needed to prepare each phase. He studied Jaws close and other classics. 2001, A Space Odyssey and Encounters. He even examined the work of James Cameron and Ridley Scott. Was aware of the pressure in his work. Was no longer just television. A significant change with the development of the Borg Queen. Initially, the authors desired for the Borg to remain mindless group, but Jonathan, the boss of Paramount Dolan, stated that the movie required a genuine villain, someone who his physically characters could converse with. At that point, the casting gave birth to the concept of the Borg Queen. She was cunning. They required someone dangerous, sexy, and eerie, but Frakes discovered that in Alice, which was fascinating. Crud, she was a fantastic fit for the part. Pale skin wires need hours of makeup application. Hair and a strangely long head. Her scene of her arrival, where her upper body is descended and fastened to her vertebrae, turned into the most iconic image from the movie. It took me 5 months to complete that shot. In First Contact, everything was larger. Compared to TV Borg makeup, which used to take 1, it took 5 minutes to get into costume. Added 30 more minutes and removed it. 90 more. They required 50 artists, but had less than 20. As the movie progressed, the makeup became more dramatic, and there were more wires. The Borg appeared to have been. They were alarming because they were spewing oil. They constructed a rig for the Queen scene to use a blue outfit and lowered Craig's body. Using digital techniques to create the appearance of it was a daring maneuver, and she was floating. First Contact was successful. Fans and critics praised it. Patrick Stewart even referred to it as the most attractive. Frakes then went on to the Star Trek movie. Direct Rebellion in Star Trek, but the sequel to Lightning Didn't Strike Twice wasn't as good. Reviews were conflicting. Stewart later said that the plot felt flat. Even Nemesis, which was not directed by Frakes, enhanced in certain areas the disappointment, and the pain began. After Frank gained momentum, Thunderbirds arrived. In 2004, a huge film with high expectations had a well-known brand and a powerful cast, Bill Ben Kingsley Paxton, and a respectable budget, but the movie was a huge failure, and critics ripped Frakes. Audiences avoided him. Subsequently stated that following Thunderbirds, no, he called it, and one answered. He had to sell his belongings and left the movie jail. London and relocated to Maine, where his spouse started a business to help maintain operations. The reset was difficult, and he hasn't directed a major film because it was more than 20 years ago, yet he persisted and returned to television, returned to Star Trek, returned to what he was aware of. He oversaw episodes of more recent Star Trek series in addition to others, like according to the librarians, TV became a location where you can relax and the person who directed it isn't noticed. Jonathan said, it was steady but glamorous. Frakes had no intention of falling in love with a film set in 1985, when he was only attempting to fulfill his duties during the Civil War North and South miniseries. He was 32. And hardly noticed, but after that came Jeannie Francis, was already well known. Collaborating with Patrick Sees and Leslie and Down initially, everything was expert, but when filming in something changed between Charleston and Natchez. Over a break for Memorial Day, They took a journey to New Orleans collectively at that